Welcome to the League of Extraordinary Storytellers, the podcast that takes you inside the dynamic world of themed experience design. I'm your host, Theron Skees. In each episode, I sit down with industry experts to explore how their teamwork and collaboration transform ideas into unforgettable destinations. I hope it inspires you to see the world through a brand new lens, one story at a time. Join us as we celebrate the visionaries who make the impossible possible. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the final episode this season of the League of Extraordinary Storytellers. I'm your host, Theron Skees, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. You know, it's awesome to hear from the audience about all of the guests that I've had and the conversations that we've had. I think about the season, and we've had 12 previous guests from all over the experience design community, from technical to non-technical, educators, authors, and it's just been amazing conversations that I've learned so much from. And when you write me, you tell me that you have learned a lot as well. So I want to encourage you, as our season wraps up, to keep writing, keep telling stories, keep telling me about what you think of our conversations. If you've got ideas, conversations you want to hear in season 2, please let me know. Reach out. Today, my final guest for the season is a front runner, a disruptor, somebody who's been at the forefront of the experience economy for decades. And I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm welcoming the founder and CEO of the World Experience Organization to the show, James Wallman. James, thanks for being with us.
Theron, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's I'm not sure how I sit with your extraordinary League of Storytellers, but I'm happy to be at the bottom, pushing up and sort of clinging on by my fingernails. But it's a real honor to be invited. Thank you.
You're being humble, and I appreciate that about you. But you're an author. You've been in the performance space. You've really been a supporter of the experience economy for decades, and I'd love for you to talk to the audience a little bit about your background, your personal journey. You know, what journey led you to kind of recognize this value of experiences, and where you are today with the World Experience Organization.
Thanks, Theron. And this is why I'm definitely at the bottom of your tree, and I'm very happy to be. Honestly, it's not humility. I don't really believe in humility. I think it's an overblown thing that people talk about, and I'm happy for those people that do it. I don't want to say that, but yeah, I think I just try to know my place, and so I came into this world from trend forecasting, definitely from experiences, and actually there's kind of two ways in, and this was in the first book that I wrote. This is a strange one. I haven't talked about this for ages. Wow. Okay, so on the day my grandfather died, it was January 20th, 2002. We'd been out for lunch, and he gave me a note. He gave me a £5, which is about $8-9. But in those days, it was enough for 2 pints of beer. Okay. Things have changed. And I lived in South London. We've been out for lunch, Sunday lunch, me, my dad, my grandma. And he gave me this £5. There was a note in this envelope, and it said in it, I only opened it after he'd gone. And it said, "Dear James, treat yourself to a nice memento. Memories live longer than dreams. Granddad."
Awesome.
Yeah, it was. And then within about 10-15 minutes, they were crossing a bridge, and his aneurysm broke open. And my father then, my father drove as fast as he could, got stopped by the police for speeding, and then got a police escort to explain what was going on. And so him and a police car streamed across London to the nearest hospital, and my granddad wasn't in the habit of giving me notes. Okay, he wasn't that kind of guy, right? My background is they're pretty, really poor, uneducated people. I mean, my father was the first to go to university. Sorry, you didn't want this long answer, but it's just
brilliant. It's brilliant.
And when I say he wasn't in the habit of, at no other point in his life had he ever given me a note. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. He'd never done it. Okay, I mean, sure, he signed the card alongside Nana for Christmas cards and birthday cards, but she wrote them and he put his name in. So it was just anyway. And And that
Wow.
idea stayed with me. Memories live longer than dreams. And I mean, he may not have meant this, okay, but I came to believe that memories came from the thing, and this, from the things that you do, the experiences that you have, not for the dreams. I think he was talking about materialistic dreams. I just bought this
Mm.
new flat. I was working in advertising, very happy with myself. Not happy, but excited, and they were excited with me. But memories live longer than dreams. And that became memories live longer than things. And I say this, and it's a common thing to people talk about now, but I'll come back into the kind of other way where this kind of idea came from. But that stayed with me. So I bounced around in my 20s, different jobs. Anyway,
Like most 20-year-olds.
yeah, exactly. Well, some are lucky, right? They know what they want to do, but not me. So sometimes I earned more in a week than I earned in a year, depending on whether I was doing a sort of materialistic type kind of, very commercial kind of thing, or much more experiential, like a ski guide and a travel rep and stuff. And then I ended up, long story short, and I'm going to tighten this up, sorry, is to say I became a trend forecaster. So the first thing I did was actually the future of travel, and then I did the future of food. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I became a cultural analyst and a trend forecaster. And it was through that work in the noughts that I kept coming across this problem with materialism and materialistic culture, and this rise of experiences. In 2007, I went to a punch drunk thing called Mask of the Red Death at the Batty Arts Centre, which later burned down. And I remember, and I was with this company, the Future Laboratory, that I worked for, where I was a trend forecaster, and it was electric. I've never seen anything like it. I was like, what have they done to theatre? And it was just thrilling. The design, the engagement, the immersion, proper immersive experience. And I was blown away, and then kept following these things. I'm based in London, so it was things like Secret Cinema, and then Yumi
Right.
Bum Bum Train, and this is what's going on here, And so my work as a trend forecaster was figuring out the future for companies like the absolute companies, BMW, Apple, Facebook, Louis Vuitton, etc. I ended up kind of like long story short, I wrote a book called Stuffication, how we've had enough of stuff, need experiences more than ever. And it was about the sunset of materialism as our driving value system, and the rise of experientialism as a driving, very important value system. And it's a first world thing. And one of the key things as I did my research on this book, so I started to, I'm a very geeky researcher. I did lots and lots of interviews for a number of years on this book, and I self-published it. Nobody would take it. And then it got picked up by Fast Company in the States, by the Financial Times over here, and then Penguin bought it. And then it kind of took off, and it was
Sure.
My grandmother, who was still with us, knew what I did for a job, because he's like, oh, you've written a book for Penguin. Oh, wow, I get it. Right, you're an author. But that was my way in. It was kind of me trying to figure out the future, and then realizing, wow, this materialism is doing this, experientialism is doing this, but also as a critical thing from the 2003, I think was the first research, up to about 2011, 12. There were bits of about 10 or 11 pieces of social science research that showed that experiences are better than material goods at making us happy. And it's very easy to say it now because everybody knows about it.
Right.
And I think my book was part of that wave. Obviously, I like to think I was the person that did it, but I wasn't. Other people were doing it too. But sharing that information, so now everybody knows it. So once comes up to Christmas, it depends on when you post this. But it comes to somebody's birthday. Do you buy them another jumper or a pair of socks or more stuff they don't need, or do you give them an experience? And the same, we have stuff. Let's go get experiences. So I got quite interested in this. That I thought it was happening. B, I thought it should happen. And if you follow something called the diffusion of innovations, of how things change in society, if you understand that, the guy that wrote it was a sociologist called Ev Rogers in 1962. This diffusion of innovations is that S shape. Once you understand that, you can influence the S. You can make something come sooner or make it go away again, like obesity in our society. Let's get rid of obesity. Let's try and change things. But because experiences are good for humans, for the economy, for society in general, individuals, groups. It's just a positive. I thought, wow, maybe I should push this a bit further forward. Then I wrote another book. I worked for the British government as a sector specialist in the experience economy. And I said to them, there is no organization for the experience economy as a general thing. Of course, there is IAPA for theme parks, and there are other organizations for vertical sectors, but there was no org that encompassed everybody. And so I said that we should make it. They said, thanks very much. That's a lovely idea, but no thanks. So I thought it should exist in the world. I didn't want to do it, but eventually I thought, okay, I will.
You were in the right place at the right time and had the passion, and it started. And thank you so much for sharing that very personal memory of your grandfather. That is such a very, not just a powerful memory, a powerful experience, but to hear how that stayed with you. Memories, last longer or more powerful than dreams. I love that. I love the catalyst of that as you described it. So thanks for sharing. I know our audience will love that. So much of our lives, so many of the experiences that we have, positive experiences and negative experiences, are sort of underscored by these very emotionally engaging moments in them. And then I think a part of our challenge as creators of these experiences is to dial into that range of human emotion and think about that. And what I've discovered is that a lot of people don't realize, a lot of companies don't realize that you can design these experiences, you can design these things so that people do make emotional connections, and how powerful that is. It leads me to another question. You've said before that experiences share a universal structure: anticipation, participation, and reflection. I love that. How does this framework shape the way that you think about creating meaning in our modern lives?
Wow, it's a great question. Thank you. Have you come across the hierarchy of experiences, this concept?
I don't think I have.
Okay.
I know Maslow's
Just
hierarchy, but yeah.
yeah, and Maslow's hierarchy has got it's interesting. There's some tensions in it. There are some other models, but this hierarchy of experiences works. It's Matt Durden's research, along with others at the
Ah,
Marriott School of Business at BYU. What's
yeah, yeah.
interesting about the hierarchy of experiences, I think, is that it's peer reviewed, it's shown to be true, and it's an additive process. So you start with, getting somebody's attention, right? The next level up is memorable, then it's meaningful, and then it's transformational. I say this because there's a lot of noise in our culture, as I'm sure you're aware at the moment, about transformational experiences. Charlie Melcher's new book, I think, has got on the front of it about, future storytelling about, says transformation. I saw something from Johannes Robier, Joe Lancicero, these guys. I suspect you've worked
Yep,
with them at Disney. I suspect
yep,
you know
Joe.
them. Yeah,
Even Joe
exactly.
Pine's new book.
Yeah, right, exactly. Transformation economy. And I think Pigal Tavakoli's new book. And everyone wants to say transformative or transformational, which is interesting and powerful. But if you think about the hierarchy of experiences, and this is why I really like the question that you just asked here, it's, attention, of course, and then memory, first steps. And then the next thing is meaningful before you get to something that is transformational. And I think a lot of people are skipping over this step. I think a lot of people are forgetting the importance of this, because if it isn't meaningless, maybe this is a really obvious point, I don't know, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently, partly because of another framework that Matt Durden and one of his colleagues at Breda University of Applied Sciences, Marcel Bastianson. It's a really
Mm.
interesting framework that they have that almost looks at a sort of temporal process of creating transformational experiences, but includes that meaningfulness. So I'm not skipping the question, by the way. I'm sort of answering it in hopefully a roundabout and useful way. So it's how do you to decide something of meaning. One of the interesting things, and there are frameworks for what is insightful and meaningful for different types of people. And if you can frame something in a way that is more meaningful for someone, you are more likely to transform them in some way. There's some brilliant research by a chap in Australia who's done this in a zoo, who primes people, and he primes people with either kind of like, caring about the planet or caring about the animals or caring about you being a good person. And if you find out what people are most interested in, where it's, self-oriented, animal-oriented, and then you frame the work around them, you are more likely, hopefully I've made that clear. Once you find out where their value system lies,
Right.
you change the kind of experience based on their value system, and you are more likely to have a transformational impact on them in the way that to raise money for this zoo or whatever it was.
Right.
So to answer your question, how do I think about that when we do things? And this is probably not going to be a very clever answer, so you're going to have to forgive me. Try and think about jobs to be done theory, right? Try and think about people. What are their emotional, social, and status is very important for people. Nobody likes to admit it, but the truth is status is key for all mammals, and we're just mammals. But what are the jobs they're trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? And therefore I'm thinking at the moment, because we're working on London Experience Week, and we're, and it's
Right.
super exciting because, well, our tickets are double the rate of where we were last year, and we've only got 1.5 times the space in the venue, so that's going to be interesting. And I talked to Steve Boyle from Epic Immersive. You possibly know Steve as well, and he's doing something in Los Angeles, and he might bring something. It's interesting how people might do other things around what we're doing. And there's a company called DNEG who did the special effects for June and doing a lot more kind of immersive experiences now, and they're going to do something. So there's lots of fringe things kind of happening. The reason I'm saying is I'm thinking about this in terms of how might we make this a meaningful week for people. Now, sure, that can be transactional, right? Meet the people you can do business with, and that's fine. Business that's just transactional is so boring. I mean,
Right.
life that's transactional is so boring. I mean,
Yeah.
transactional relationships are so boring. It's real meaning. Actually, the most fun, and really, thank you for having me on this, is when you do work with people you like, because
Right.
then then what you're doing is you're building a relationship and it's fun, and you're doing work at the same time. So in terms of meaning, I'm trying to think about, well, we have all these people that apply to the WXO to join, and we vet all the members. So therefore and two of the questions we ask are, what are the challenges that you're thinking about a lot at the moment, and what would transform your world?
Mm.
And I mean, this was last year, actually, at Christmas. I turned it into a 597-page document and read it because I'm so old and boring that I wanted to be clear about it. Of course, I've also put it through ChatGPT and done the machine on it too. But I did do that myself and highlighted the thing. My wife thinks I'm mad, but there you go. To try and understand what it is and try and see patterns so that we can try and work out what people's challenges are, and therefore
Yeah.
provide something that is meaningful to them.
I have this the question sort of sprang out of what I see as well. People focusing on storytelling. It seems like it's on every corner. Don Miller, right? Story brand, and how important that is. And I always find myself preaching that story is only one part, one dimension of the entire experience, and in fact the human experience, and that story should drive experience. And this idea of meaning in modern life, I'm very idealistic in a sense, if not unrealistic. I would love to see more business people focused on adding meaning to customers' lives, and getting away from transaction and doing things that really create meaning. Said differently, it that forms an emotional connection between a brand and a customer in a unique way. And I'm just crazy enough to believe that the brands, the companies, the leadership teams that really take on this mindset can truly stand out in a global economy where guest centricity is not focused, right? Where risks are really not taken, and we have an entire corporate culture that is really focused on bottom line and shareholder value only. And those that can really adopt this radical idea of being guest centric, and focusing on experiences can really make a difference. And I think, and again, it's idealistic to think so, but I think that can improve people's everyday lives. If you think about just your everyday life, morning to night, from when you get back to your home or your flat, how many experiences do you have during a day? That could be with things, mechanisms, with people, and how many times, if those experiences, those interactions, if they were designed by somebody and maintained to be a certain way, how much more would each of those experiences improve your day and add meaning? You know, it's a question that I pose to everybody.
That's really fascinating because you and I haven't had this conversation. And what you're saying to me is similar words. I'm going to share with you the way I phrase that because you and I are 1 zillion% on the same team there, because I think this is the opportunity of what we're doing. I want to come back to what you're saying about story being central, because actually it's central to shareholder value, because identity, storytelling, brand are really intermingled. And if you look at the brands
Yeah,
that really make it, I mean, Apple is a superb example of this. Think of the identity. I was in a
yeah.
where was I? Some cafe or something the other day. And you know what? Or actually, no, I went to an interesting meeting with these startup people, and everybody's machine is an Apple. You can't get out there with a Dell. No, 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 no. And do you know what? But it does the same thing. There was a
So
time during
true.
COVID, my Mac broke. Okay, and I'm like, I couldn't afford it. I won't go into the credit card scenario where I was at the time. And so it's half the price for a machine that's just as good. It's just a slightly different UI. It's a user interface. Right? It does the same thing, but I couldn't. As soon as I mean, I do have a second-hand Mac. Okay, fair enough. It's a second-hand one, but but at the same time, as soon as I get a Mac, I get a Mac. Anyway, come back to what you say. So my take is this. I say my take, it's therefore the WXO's take, is that just as materialism and the rise of consumerism, which really got going in the 1920s in the United States, has transformed standards of living. Okay. I believe that experientialism and the experience revolution will transform quality of life. And what happened in the 1920s was, I think this is chapter 2 of Stuffication. I remember doing the research. It's so fascinating because you had the 3 key, ingredients, really. You've got the government, this is time the mad men and the mad women, in particular, and the industrialists, but for the people as well. And what they did, they colluded from a certain point of view to make better stuff. So it's the time when the radio guys and the toaster makers and the
Right.
white
Industrial
manufacturers.
designers.
Yeah, exactly. They were
Yeah.
sharing ideas across sectors to make better stuff, which was making people's lives better as well. And there was this brilliant woman called Selling Miss, who wrote a book. What's her name? Hey, she wrote a book called Selling Mrs. Consumer and presented at Congress in 1932, I think. There's a beautiful piece from 1928 from The Atlantic by this guy about creating the consumer. Really interesting stuff. Sorry, that's the consumer revolution, when the consumer was really
Right.
created. And so they're making that better stuff, and all those bits of better stuff has added up to this transformation in standards of living. And that's left us, here we are in the 2020s, say 100 years later, so rich. I mean, really, I mean, I have some debts and stuff, but you think about our normal everyday lives.
Yeah.
I'm going to Los Angeles in January, and I'm sure you get on a plane a few times, and we have these lives where we have great showers and we've got, etc. And it's also hauled, the Indians, the Chinese, the Brazilians, and people in Nigeria, etc., out of poverty. We've got, if you look at Our World in Data, run by this German guy called Max Rosa at Oxford University, it shows just life is so much better. But we've also got problems with the, the materialism has meant we're atomized as society. It's
Mm.
meant that we've got these environmental problems. But I'm with you about this experience thing. So this is what is interesting hearing your phrasing of this, is my take, and this is the WXO, right? So we've got, what are we now, about 1,100 members in 50 countries. We have people who do immersive experiences, themed entertainment things, FECs, location-based experiences, customer experiences, employee experiences. Because if you think about a person's life, they have a Monday morning at work, they've got a Tuesday lunchtime, they've got a Thursday evening, exactly as you were saying, as all of these things are moments of their lives. Now, those moments add up to lives. And moments, if you call it from a business point of view, are experiences that we can design.
Right.
Every time we make one of those a bit better, and we make somebody's moment of their life better, moments add up to lives, we are making better lives. And I think the possibility is just, and it's ultimately quite a radical idea. That's why it's interesting. I love what you're saying about being an idealist, but I think this is because this has happened in the last 100 years. We went from most people being really poor and not being, not, etc. And that transformation in standards of living can happen in terms of transformation of quality of life. And it's our job, responsibility, opportunity
Yeah.
to do that, to share these ideas. And so what you're talking about in terms of storytelling is thinking about a person's identity as they go through their day and who they are at that time. And if we can turn them into the hero of their own journey, if we give them an opportunity to, experience flow, experience all those emotions that are difficult and awkward, shame, disgust, be alive. If we can do that,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, when I kind of put my futurist hat on, this is where I get a little stuck. Because if you think about, I'm thinking about my great grandparents and my grandparents being born about 100 years or so ago. I don't think they could have imagined what life was like today. So just imagine what life's going to be like in 2120 because of the work that's being put in now by
Yeah.
experienced people. I think
Yeah.
it's exciting. I'm with you.
It's
But I think it's
tremendously
possible.
exciting.
You're not just an idealist. It's going to
Yeah.
happen. And we're making it
It's
happen.
Yeah, I agree. This is exciting talk. The thing that happened to me that led me to sort of that belief was frankly working at Disney and seeing that the model of a theme park, an amusement park as well, it doesn't work. The investment doesn't work if people don't come back over and over and over again. At one time, visits, there would not be an industry. It would close, right? Nobody's going to invest $2 billion, $3 billion on a theme park if the ROI is, never gets met. So that mindset followed all the way back up the chain, if you will, the value chain to the creation of the experience to begin with. So, as designers within that economy, within that segment, making an emotional connection to a guest, to a visitor, that's a design criteria, just like materiality, just like time of day, just like all of the things that you consider when you design. One thing that we had, and I'm assuming many experienced designers also have to think through this, is making an emotional connection with the customer, the guest, the visitor. So when my career at Imagineering ended in 2020 with the pandemic, the question that I asked myself was, is what I know, would it be transferable? Would it be beneficial to any other segment of the economy? Or am I just kind of a theme park person, right? That's what I do. That's the market that I'm going to stay in. That's kind of safe for me. And what I realized is I imagined myself, which I've now had these in-person discussions, but I imagined a discussion with the CEO, a CFO, and basically said, are you sure that all of the experiences that customers are having with your brand today are positive? And that's an unanswerable question because you can't possibly know the way that most companies are built. And so the answer is no, or that's impossible. And then the follow-up provocative answer is, would you like to? Wouldn't you like to be more sure that the majority of the experiences that your customers have with your brand are positive, then they drive another connection. They drive the desire to want to come back and reconnect. And there's not a CEO or CFO or CMO or anybody in the C-suite who's really focused on their company or their brand growth who wouldn't say, yes, how do we do that? And the answer is storytelling and experience generation consistently across all touch points of the brand, right? Now you're driving Disney's proven it, right? It's, what is it now, 90 years, 100 years, whatever it is, that been around, where people come back over and over and over again. So that secret sauce can be applied, I think, commercially to any segment of our economy, because people are people. And if they emotionally connect with the story, they're going to want to re-engage with that story. They're going to tell others about the story and the experience they had. And I just feel like for society, it's good. But for commercial, it's really good if some companies were able to really move in this direction. Sorry, that's my idealism.
No, I think I agree with you. It's interesting that what you're talking about and the way you're talking about it. And I think I sort of have this theory that I think fits with what you're saying here, that there are slightly two sides of the experience economy. To be clear, Joe Pine doesn't recognize this at all. He thinks I'm wrong, but that's fine. That's fine. Because he's been there when I've been presenting this. And I think there's two. There's one that's very much driven by, and so if you think about experientialism, and the experience economy could be a useful kind of like lens in terms of experientialism, is the cultural shift. Okay. Whereas experience economy, of course, is, is coming from, and that, it's Joe's concept, Joe and Jim's concept in terms of, and the central idea there is really the progression of economic value, because they're business analysts first. Whereas I came at this from a cultural lens, and therefore the core idea in stuffification was actually really the rise of experientialism. But the publishers like the name stuffification. It's a much better name than experientialist. They said it sounded like a novel, so there you go. But really, so if you think, and to think about the progression of economic value is about that idea of, commodities to industrial in manufactured goods to services to experiences, and that what happens over time is those things to the left, commodities, goods, services, become commoditized and harder to stand out from your competition, but also where the value gets created moves across over time as well. And you can see that in terms of hotels. You think about a budget hotel nowadays. I say this to you, Theron. I know that you're a super wealthy man. You've never heard of a budget hotel, but you probably
Not
remember. But I'm staying at a place. I'm going to Amsterdam this week we're holding an event there, and my starting point is I want to stay in a budget boutique place. The WXO is not a rich organization, not yet. Hopefully, maybe one day. It's like if a corporate is paying for you, you stay in a super nice place. Exactly. Otherwise, anyway. But budget hotels, the bed's comfy. You get a good night's sleep. The world is, you can't competing through service is how. It is really hard. You get to a point, whereas experience has kind of got this magic. So the progression of economic values from a business lens is experiences are today how you stand out, and you get is a differentiator, but it's also where you create more value. Whereas on the experiential side, it's the rise of things like, you look at Disney is a lovely example where the money is coming from, or where they're pouring their efforts and energies into, which is experiences, right? It's very true. And the rise of location-based experiences, and the increase in price at Disney as well. It's really causing some tension. But it's, the bottom line is we have, what is it, 40,000, is it 4,000 weeks, 80 years. We got 24 hours a day. And if we earn more money, an hour becomes more valuable. Whereas goods, you've only got 2 feet. You're not going to get any more feet. You can only wear one pair of shoes at a time. So stuff has got a kind of certain kind of point that it gets to. So do you see what I mean? So from Absolutely. A certain point of view, where you were working and cut your teeth for years is the core of how to make a really amazing experience. And then you've got this other, so what that, and that's the area that's growing, driven by experientialism. And you've got this other area of the experience economy being driven by the progression of economic value, where the skills of creating an amazing experience are especially valuable now, because that's how you differentiate and that's how you create value. And of course, a business is about creating value and capturing some of that value. So it means that experience design, delivery, operations, etc., are the core area of
Yeah.
value creation and value capturing.
Yeah, it totally feels like I love your take on culture. I really I think that's absolutely right. Sorry, Joe. Um, uh,
No, no, no.
what when you look at the experience economy, right? Joe and James's book, 1999, I believe it was that it came out, 98, 99. Your book, Stuffocation. You really are talking about these shifts in the global economy, shifts in us as humans, as a group. And if you take everything that we just talked about and you look at the largest spending group right now in the world, which is Gen Z, you're talking about, I think it was, the prediction was by 2030, it's like $7 trillion being spent in the experience sector, because this demographic, this generation values experiences over possessions. It's everything that you said. So I personally am so grateful for yourself, for Joe and James, for seeing that so far in advance and preparing us for what exists today. So companies, what I just said, what you just said, everything that we stand for and represent, we're not climbing uphill to convince people this is the way of the future. We're basically telling them these are the customers, this is what they value, not only in their personal lives, cultural benefit, meaning in their lives, but commercially, this is what they're after. So we, in a sense, have the secret sauce, the way to make it work for them. Some won't listen and they'll go the way of Macy's and Toys R Us and Sears and everybody else. Those are just retailers, but and
Yeah,
how many people have they just
I've
laid
been to the
off?
States. I
Yeah,
know of the retailers.
I mean, ghost towns in a lot of
Yeah.
malls and commercial districts. So there will be some brands that just won't listen and they'll plow through with what they've been doing. And then other brands, other companies will listen and will understand this is a way to bridge between the experience economy and story and creating experiences and this generation and what they're truly after. And so I love that. I love the fact that I was able to key into that at an early stage because of works like what you've produced, what Joe has produced, Joe and James, and many others. And I think we're living in the time that was predicted. And those of us that listened and we were prepared for this. I love that. I have another question for you, and it's kind of um, trails on what we've been talking about, and that's really collaboration within this big giant industry, right? None of us can do this alone. Not one single discipline is going to make this successful. So I really love the fact your work with WXO and everything. You emphasize that experiences are multidisciplinary. And what I'd love to explore a little bit with you is what lesson experienced designers can learn from other sectors, hospitality, retail, healthcare, about creating this kind of meaningful engagement. What have you seen?
That is a very good question. Um, I mean, let's make the starting point that great innovation comes when you take ideas from one sector and you smash it together with another, and you come up with a bad idea or a good idea, but at least you come up with something new and different and weird, and who knows where that goes.
Right, right.
And I guess I think it's about cherry picking, right? It's about looking at, I'm thinking about, you cherry pick when you go through an experience and you see something, you think, oh, they did this particularly well, or they didn't do this so well. I think a lot of the really good work actually comes from the immersive theatre world at the moment. I think, and that said, some of it can be a bit samey. So, and some of the location based experiences, I'm thinking of one I went to the other week called Fame Factory. And
Mm.
interesting, it sort of swings back to your question about meaning. It's just opened. It's. I think they popped it up, whatever. They tested it out in Riyadh. It's opened in London like 3 weeks ago. It's going to be like opening in Las Vegas in, I think that's public news, in sort of April, March, April 26. It's a really great experience. And the IP is Fame, so it's free IP. We all get it. We all get the celebrity thing. And I went with my wife, and actually, turns out one of her friends is acting in it too. But I know the people behind it, and
Cool.
it was really fun. I went with my wife and my son, and we got to have a photo shoot. We got to do a video shoot. We got to walk the red carpet. And so, what was really interesting, come back to that point you were talking about storytelling, and I was swinging it around into identity. There's that great book by George Akerlof, Identity Economics, from about 2011. Really, really interesting book. It's how people vote, right? You can, in the UK, you can tell, you can go back to when the Vikings came over and the French came over, kind of thing. And you go like, oh, people still vote in those same patterns, right? I mean, identity is a surreal thing. It's a story, obviously, of who we are. But what was really nice is it was very clear to us at each point what identity we had. So we went on this sort of fake private plane at one point, and so there's girl was this sort of like as the hostess, and it was just funny and silly,
Sounds
and
fun.
yeah, really really fun. And it was what was interesting about it, and there were some things that it wasn't perfect. It's new. Also, to be frank, coming back to that point about meaning, I really wanted them to etch a bit more meaning into it. It was just a little bit light. It was a bit like watching a TV show that's just a bit of fun, a bit of distraction, rather than sort of like a meatier thing that really makes you feel something. And I think that's also okay. We're in the 1920s of products, right? So in the 2020s of experience, we're figuring this stuff out. But it was that sense that you knew what your identity was each time you went through. And I'm saying this, there's one of our members, Peter, in Denmark, who has done work with retailers, where you think about, when someone comes up to you and says, "Hi, can I help you today?" Really? Okay, that's just help. It's just that service is not experience, right? Just try and find out your identity and what you're trying to do and who you're trying to be, and giving you a sense. And I think that there is, you think about quick service restaurants as well, and what Starbucks has done, and I've done some work looking at QSRs. They're called quick service restaurants, fast food places, and it's all
Right.
about efficiency. And you are just seen as a thing that they can shove some calories into,
Yeah.
versus brands who actually, when you go in there, I mean, I'm not a fan. Is it Hollister, that brand for teenage kids? And it's always,
Yeah.
they've got the lights turned down and the music turned up, right? And my
Yep.
daughter's
Tons of
14,
cologne
so
in the atmosphere.
yeah, yeah. I mean, awful, right? But it's designed for that, thought about their audience. So when you go in there, you're like, I'm really cool. I'm in a nightclub. All of a sudden, you think about surf brands. You think about the number of surf brands who sell in city centres, which obviously is daft because there is surf in Munich, obviously, but apart from Munich, it's kind of like, why are you selling it? Okay, you're selling, it's the lifestyle brand, it's the sense of identity. So I'm probably not giving you a great answer there in terms of, there's a lot of fuss around, how Apple took ideas from Ritz-Carlton in terms of hospitality for their
That's
stores
interesting.
some years ago. I don't know if I've stayed in a Ritz-Carlton, so I'm not really sure about that. But I think that actually, you think about the more interesting hotels. You stay in a luxury hotel, and, I do every now and again. They're often really nice. So boring.
Yeah.
Nice is
Yeah.
so boring, But yeah, I like that Fame Factory. And I went to a digital artwork piece, and most digital artwork pieces are those, the Van Gogh immersives where it's moving, okay, and that's it
Right.
has its place. But the thing I went to the other day was by this guy called Ryoji Ikeda, a Japanese guy who lives in Paris, and it was in London, and we lay on bean bags on our backs and looked up at this thing. It was exquisite. It was absolutely, and the pace, and it was also as an audio visual experience. So we had the audio with it as well. And that's one thing that I'm seeing more and more is the use of really good audio. And you can,
Mm.
you can spend the money on an L-acoustic system or something, or you can just use some subwoofers. But the use of it can also be done not that well. There's that lovely place, Mercer Labs, just in the financial district in Manhattan, and they've got a room there that is audio kind of only, and it feels. I want to be as. I mean, they've got some wonderful stuff in there. I think it's a beautiful job that they've done, but the way they'd use the audio felt like it was somebody with a massive hammer trying to sort of tickle you. I was like, whack. But that's, that's also, again, I want to come back to that point about the 1920s and the 2020s, and is that that's okay. That's playing. And I think that's really important. I feel so blessed to be going to these things and having an
Yeah.
opinion. I want to be really positive about all these things. And there is some really interesting stuff coming out of that world of kind of eyes closed, audio first experiences that
Yeah.
I think is super interesting.
Very sensory driven. What was the restaurant? Trying to remember. I'm going
Don
to get it
Lenoir.
wrong. I think it
Don
was like
Lenoir.
Blind Cow or something. Is where you were complete. It was
Yeah,
the whole
okay.
restaurant was run by the staff was by sight impaired people, and the whole restaurant was dark, and you were served food and you ate literally not knowing what you were eating. It's interesting. A
Had you
lot
been?
of the examples that you've given were I would consider are, I hate to say it like this, but more entertainment, right? They are, you would go and to an exhibit, you'd go to an immersive show, you would, do those things. And then you think of hotels and you think of those experiences. And I always think of the commercial world, the things that we have to do, grocery shopping, when we go to a hospital for healthcare, education. There's so many sectors that we have to have in our world, and how impactful could what we've learned in the experience economy, in the experience sector, how impactful could they be there, and make improvements? That's what I love doing. That I just talked to somebody last week who is the CEO of a hospital system in the Western United States, and we were talking about health and healing and environments for healing and how important that is. And it's just, that is what I find the most fascinating, is these two things coming together, not just for commercial profit, although I firmly believe that those brands that lean into that will differentiate and will be more profitable, but just more meaning, more benefit in our lives, as cultures around the world.
I love what you just said. Look, if the creative and the commercial don't fit together, then how does that even work? The two have
Right.
got to run together. But
Totally.
this is, I mean, to an extent, it's the application of psychology. And I know there's a place there's somewhere in Florida where they've kind of used Disney stuff for kids in hospitals. But there's also that, like I say, the application of psychology is that stuff that shows that when old people are kind of set in a setting that's like, I don't know, the 1970s or something, they feel younger because that's their association with it. And the opportunities, I've just seen that the American government or Medicaid now supports Native American healing forms like smudging and things like that, and
Oh,
is
wow.
paid for by Medicaid for people in, I think, the Navajo and some of the other indigenous tribes in the States. It
That's
was in The
awesome.
Economist. I read it this week, but it's the realization that is it funny though, because I think in terms of education, look, this is one of the things about experience design, because technically speaking, you can't quite design an experience for people. You can design for an experience to happen. You design for a transformation. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the same with people too. So it's kind of like almost like a flow design, right? You set up the conditions. Think about what Maslow talks about in his book about peaks. Was it Peak Experiences? Is that the book? He says, the peak experience isn't in any of the onboarding or any of the stuff. You could look at a flower and be enwrapped. It's
Right.
really how you approach something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm thinking of I've been to university a few times, and the most recent time I went was a startup course, and it was utterly transformational. I went from being I mean, I was an author, right? That was my thing. I was thinking, I
Right.
was writing, and then I tried to do this business, and I've applied the ideas to the WXO, which is why, well, I probably haven't applied them that well, but I'm doing my best. But it was because I was I was the agent in that. You think about self-determination theory, mastery, autonomy, relatedness, but also I always cheat and add on S-Mars, as in the planet, but as safety, security, and status, very important. But in terms of, I was a person who, a dad with a wife and 2 kids, need to make things work. I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to be a
Yeah.
good dad, to be a good husband, to be, I don't know about a role model, but someone that my kids won't, want to talk to at some point later. And now, and I really wanted to go on that journey. And so therefore but that's not to say that education couldn't benefit from some of these ideas. But I think hospitals in the healthcare system, it's about maybe where the agency is put, because, agency is, I talked to Martin Seligman, the positive psychology guy, about this, the vital importance of agency for people. And so maybe if the hospital system is designed where you are treated as a piece of meat,
Right.
obviously technically we are pieces of meat with bones that sort of carrying around these identities that we have. But if you're treated like some sort of, Western approaches can be a bit too reductive. You are a piece of meat that we are going to fix. We'll
Yeah.
fix you, and then out you go. We can fix you. And this is probably some of the problems we have in our societies, where we've kind of, the social contract is, right, you're the government. I vote for you or not vote for you, but because you run the army and the taxes and everything, you ought to look after me. Okay, you got that? Okay, fine. That lack of agency that people,
Yeah.
maybe you have less of a problem with this than we have in our country, but that lack of agency in any experience
Yeah.
is not going to be very good for people, because they don't see themselves as the hero on their journey. And actually, I might be wandering here, Theron, but one of the things I think, because you mentioned guest centricity, and I remember that swing in business towards customer centricity some years ago, and that realization, the customer first. And one of the things that this application of this lens of experience to businesses is that instead of saying customer or guest, it's all of a sudden seeing the person as a hero on that hero's journey, as the archetypal structure. And
Absolutely.
despite there are people that disagree with me around this, but for me, the hero's journey is not Vogler's version, it's not Campbell's version. Forget all this, and it's not even, who's the chap who wrote Into the Woods? That brilliant. It doesn't on the Freitag period. It doesn't really matter. The hero's journey is person, problem, let's call it a resolution, or something that happens next. But that is the
Right.
essential, right? You try and start your car in the morning, where you've got this water you need to cross, you've got this barrier to get over, you've got this thing to go down, this whole, man in hole story, etc. And that is a constant. It's the kind of meta shape,
Yeah.
the
It's a
platonic
cycle.
form. Yeah, exactly, that we go through. And so if you enable somebody to feel that they are in some way the protagonist in that role, and you design around them and see yourself as the mentor or the challenge or the was it tease, trials, enemies, and sword. Okay, it's the way I remember it. Sorry.
Right.
You've got the inert things in your way, and you've got the active people, the enemies.
Yeah.
The boss you hate, or the annoying person anyway. And then you've got the inert things that are on your side, like the wind behind you in Moana, or the sword or the lightsaber. And then you've got the friends that help you. So the brand's
Yeah.
role, I think, is to recognize that the customer guest protagonist is the protagonist. And
Yes.
how might we enable that person or that group of people to move forward, to cross that bridge, to go over that water, etc. Sorry, I've got into one there, but that's where I think how that experience lens can really be powerful, because you
Yeah.
can have a different understanding of a person.
Yeah, I love that. I think our conversation is amazing. Actually, I've bypassed the majority of my questions because it's so interesting. It's this idea of experience literally knits people together. I think, and I love this idea of the hero's journey, or the structure of a story. And I included that in my book too, but in a very simple way, so that it wouldn't um, represent any one particular one. And the piece that I like there is allies, right? We all need allies to help us. Now, it could be the Excalibur that you found, but I think the intent there is that it's meant to show that we could potentially make it through this life as a loner. But the reality is, as we are encountering those obstacles, those challenges, those difficulties, it's always great to have allies to help us through. And that human connection strengthens us and makes each one of us better as we achieve a new normal from that experience. So I love that. I think that's so brilliant, and really takes experiences out of the entertainment world and out of the commercial world, looking at them in those two lenses, and really looking at them from the lens of humanity, which it's storytelling and experiences that unite us. That's what the forefathers and my family told my great grandparents, my grandparents, and my parents, that told me, right? That's the stories of our families and of our lives. Those are all stories and experiences that you have with them. So I really think that's brilliant. If it's okay with you, I'd love to make a quick pivot, not pivot, but I'd like to bring technology and trends into our discussion. It definitely, technology continues to shape, the way that all of us engage with the world. And it really does feel like technology is on this, climb, and you've got, in some cases, people being laid off because their roles are being replaced. And in other cases, you have people saying, like I've been guilty of saying, AI is not going to necessarily replace your job if you're in a creative world, but people who know how to use AI may replace you in this. So I'm curious on your take on this. How do you see these emerging tools like AI and mixed reality and VR and AR and all this stuff? How do you see it influencing experiences in our society?
That's a huge question. I love it. Thank you. Okay, so can we split them between AI and all those other technologies? I feel like they're both super connected and separate. Yeah, look, my take on AI is what a tool. I feel blessed to be alive during an industrial revolution. It is scary. It's like, wow, how do we do that? It's the number of people that say they're AI experts. Congratulations to them, because that is really making up something, because we don't know. And you
Yeah.
think when YouTube came along, nobody knew what it would do. You think about it's the it's always with these things. It's the second order consequences where stuff gets really interesting. Driverless cars will change the structure of cities. Even those city bikes. I don't know if you have them
Oh,
where you
yes.
are. I guess. Yeah. Okay. I mean, city bikes have made places that were just a pain to get to or to get from. Now you can take a one-way bicycle and get an Uber home if that's what you want to do. But you can
Yeah.
it opens places up in a really lovely way. And AI, who knows where it's going to take us? And it's, one person say, oh, you're using it. There's always this kind of, you're using it wrong. It can do this, it can do that. And it's both. One of the interesting things is, the Mill, who, for example, did the FX for Gladiator, folded after I don't know how many years. And talking to a company the other day who did the special effects for Dune, they're moving into immersive experiences. Why?
Wow.
Because I don't know if you're in contact with Louis Alfieri, but Louis is all over the AI revolution. He's brilliant with this. He's such a,
Yeah.
for someone who's been in this industry, I guess probably as long as you, and he's just like, he's so looking to the future.
He's
He's
great.
great and he's great because it means I don't have to keep up because he's doing the work for me. I guess that's the experience. The idea, what was it? Was it John Maynard Keynes, with that idea of the era of leisure? And I saw someone the other day, actually, this statement from some company that's just bought them like Miami Tennis Championship and a few other things, and they're doing this this thing. They're wrapping up a bunch of different experiences that they're buying. And this guy said this thing that everyone experiences rather than things nowadays. Some clever, super rich guy in Los Angeles. And he says, because of AI and all these the other things, people are going to have more time for leisure. So hence he's explaining why they spent some, I don't know, hundreds of millions to buy this media thing. And I think that's getting it wrong. I used to have this idea that 1750, I sort of still am sticking to this age, 1750 to 2050 will be seen as the time of the kind of the working time, the industrious era. Because pre 1750 and kind of, clock time and the Industrial Revolution, people generally worked in fields. That's what most people did most of the time, right? That's
Right.
what we did.
Agrarian
And so,
society.
yeah, exactly. And, and from there, people moved, and they're still doing it in some countries like Bangladesh, where they're moving from the fields to go work in the industry, having their industrial revolution, because you earn more money, you provide a better world for your kids, etc. Right? But we may come out the other side of it. I mean, I'll be pretty much dead by then, but whatever, for our kids and our grandkids and the next generations, where they might be freed up. But that's also maybe missing the point, because look at the work that you and I do. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't know how often you look at spreadsheets. That's part of the game.
Right.
But I use ChatGPT as a part-time CFO the other day. And I went through all I just uploaded it and said, look, these are my questions. I've got a sense of it, sure. And like, what do you think? Where are we? What's going on? And it's like having this brilliant idiot, as you know, right? So it's,
Yeah.
but it's also an amazing sparring partner. I was out with a couple of very good friends from when I was at university. One friend, anyway, these super bright friends. One's a diplomat and one's a CMO, and it was like talking to ChatGPT, because you've got these really good sparky ideas, but you could to and fro.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have the answer to that. I think that the idea that it will take away some jobs is just, I feel for those people in the movie industry. Fascinating it will change, but there will be new jobs. We will find new things to do, and
That's
that'll
right.
be awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
To come back to sort of XR and AR and VR, is, technologies kind of go through a few processes. There's that terrible Gartner hype cycle thing, which captures things so well. As people get better. I worked in the first edition of mobile internet, and it was called WAP, Wireless Access Protocol, back
Right.
in 2001, 2002, and everyone was like, the mobile internet, and it was terrible. It was blocky, blah blah blah. It was, like, think about dial-up internet. It was just worldwide wait. But now, look, here we are having a video call from Florida to London.
Instant.
Super. Yeah, it's amazing. Lucky us, right? You think about the transatlantic phone calls, how you used to get that gap and you have to wait. And it's just, wow, it's amazing. And VR, I think, is going through an interesting time where it's starting to, this might sound weird, find its feet. You think about what Sandbox VR is doing and just making a ton of money. And then you think about these, what are they called? But you've got multiple people in a VR thing. One of the problems with VR is how it atomizes you away from your friends. But you've got these new versions. There was Horizons of Khufu. There is, what was that thing that I did the other day? That was, it was a, trying to think what it was, Pompeii. But the thing was, I was with other people. And, so you kind of wandering around this space, and I could see those people. So, I was there with the kids, I was there with friends. And so VR doesn't have to separate you from other people. So, wow, actually, the problem with VR has now just disappeared. Now we can go have fun, explore an area together. So that's one thing. The other thing is, obviously, it's exceptional for empathy, giving you the opportunity to understand what it's like to be, maybe blind's not a good example, but I remember doing one that was about Alzheimer's. It was in Santa Fe, and it was just that helped me understand and feel what it might be like to
Wow.
somebody else. But
Wow.
then you look at AR and what's coming with those snap glasses. I think I'm old enough to say that I find it a bit frightening, and I like the real world. And I'm just going to throw it in there that one of the interesting things about all these, XR, AR, VR, anything reality, extra reality, is that we've been living in a extra reality since when was the what's it called, the cognitive revolution of something like 60,000 years ago, where we believe in things that don't exist. So you believe there is a place called the United States of America, as I do. I believe there's a place called London, but really, what is the you think about when you get to the edge and you step across and you're in Canada. Well, Nothing's happened. I think that it exists in the minds of people. It's a bit like
Yeah.
football clubs or, whatever. And, trade, money, lots of these things exist in here. So our realities were augmented 60,000 years ago. And that's partly what makes being human so bloody interesting, this whole idea of identity and story and how that's, at a higher level to other mammals, certainly. So what am I really saying about what I think about XR and MR? They're just new ways to play, new ways to tell
Yeah.
stories, new ways to exist. They add a bit more color. And will they get rid of everything else? No, because, video didn't kill the radio. It just
Right.
turned into
Exactly.
podcasting and it's everywhere. And here we are.
It's so funny that you say that because I remember way back in the Wayback Machine, Disney launched a interactive. It was, I think it was web based, I believe, but it was called Virtual Magic Kingdom, and they launched it for a celebration that they were doing, anniversary or something. I don't recall the event, but it was really cool. It was a place where you could log in, and you had a isometric view of the park, and you could walk around the park virtually. You didn't have a first person view, but you had a little avatar that would go through, and you'd meet people that were there, and you could chat and everything, and it was really cool. And I remember myself and a few others over the years were really trying to get Disney to build this, take advantage of the AR, the mixed reality revolution, and create a more immersive version of Virtual Magic Kingdom. And the company would say vehemently, we're not going to do that because we're really concerned that that's going to cannibalize physical visitation to our parks, right? That's the big money. It's the gate click, it's the concessions. And if we create another way to enjoy this, it'll cannibalize us. It'll mess us up. And we were passionate that it wouldn't, and that it actually would bring more people. And they never did it, never did it. They literally just announced recently to launch a virtual version of their in-park experiences. And I'm just like, finally, that they realized, and possibly the technology is at a point where you can offer this and not be afraid that it's going to take your core business away, that it actually offers another experience that you really can't get even by being there in person. It's virtual. So I love that it's opening kind of these new frontiers in a sense, and it's been around for a while. But I think it's amazing to watch different individuals in our community of experience creators as well as companies leveraging them now in different ways. And that ties into one of my last questions, and that is, what do you see as sort of this next kind of major frontier in the experience economy, whether it's a trend, a technology, or where do you see that this is all going? What do you think is next?
There are, as a trend broadcaster, there are so many. I think the most exciting future of the experience economy is growth, of growth of all sorts, because people increasingly think that experience are better than things. And, once that information gets out and gets shared, it becomes a thing that you do. So that's hugely positive. From a brand point of view, and a lot of the money's going to come from brands. Experiences are an amazing way to be memorable, to move the needle, to impact people, to engage in a way that is just completely different to other forms of let's call them interruption advertising, as opposed to kind of engagement attention. I don't know, I'm making up that term, it's not a very good term. And you see this blurring, and you see the kind of like cross-sector ideas of how gaming is coming into these things, and different ways of doing gamification, and thinking about story, and different brands thinking about the importance of story. And the more that people do that, and the more they see the impact it has on shareholder value. And you talked about it earlier, and you were sort of saying, storytelling rather than shareholder value. But the truth is the storytelling that impacts the shareholder value, and it's the short-termism that says, let's focus on the bottom line, that is completely missing the point. Because the brands that succeed, there was a 25-year study by these guys, called The Long and the Short of It was this study, 25-year study. It's a British study into the brands that made it. And the ones that had the highest increase in their share valuation, the valuation of the companies, was those that were famous and they had an emotional thing, that, you know, an emotional connection. An emotional connection is another word for saying that you care, and that's story, right? How do you there is no emotion without some kind of story. Otherwise, it has no meaning to that thing. But in terms of sort of specifics, I think the world for location-based experiences, not just entertainment, is looking really exciting. The trend that kind of gets me, and it's really early, but I see it happening, is the rise of these audio immersive things. There's Chromasonic in Los Angeles. There's the Hum that was in Vegas, but now it's just opened in New York, in the wrong location, in my view. There's Emergence, which opened in New York like about a month or so ago. And there's, what was it? Dream Machine in London is another really nice example. And it's these, audio immersive things where the audio is often more transducers than actual speakers. And what's interesting about this is it kind of puts you into that kind of hypnagogic state, which is very similar to the psychedelic state. And psychedelics have been shown, as I'm actually come across the research, have been really, really good for people with PTSD, sure, people with problems,
Sure.
but also for people, that's the positive psychology. You know, psilocybin from magic mushrooms has been shown to be amazing for people with depression. And these are kind of gateways. Let's think about that idea of, you know, materialism transforming standards of living and the possibility for experientialism to transform quality of life. This is kind of like, how do we go to the next level, right? I think that there's a part of me, and I remember reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and thinking about the good life and what the good life is. And I think we're coming to a point where I think it's the great life is going to be possible for so many people. And I was at something in South by Southwest in Austin. There's a chap there who's ex-Meowolf who's creating something. I sort of challenged him, and his answer was brilliant because he just showed me how limiting my question was. Actually, it was really good. I'm trying to think what his name is. He's the third. Drinkwater the third. Corvus Brinkhoff the third. Only Americans have number 3.
What a
It's
great
like
name.
king thing in Americans, right? You're the second, you're the third, whatever. Joe Pine is the second, isn't he? Right?
That's right.
BJP the second, right? Same as his father. And I'd said to him, he was talking about transformational, sort of art-driven well-being kind of experiences, and how it can transform people, take people to the next level. And I put my hand up and said, look, you know, that's great, but what if people don't want to be transformed? Because I have this bit of a thing about transformation, because I'm on the Transformational Travel Council advisory board. And their thing is always transformational travel. Well, sometimes you go on a vacation and I don't want to change. I
Yeah.
want to see my kids. I want to spend time with them. You know, I went on a holiday with my dad this year. We went on a barge in Champagne region in France, right? And me and my dad for 4 or 5 days
Nice.
drank champagne. We kept missing the restaurants because it's France. So we ate frozen pizza, drank cheap champagne, and went on this boat. It was glorious. No transformation, just a nice time with my dad.
Yeah.
And so I said to him, look, you know, what about transformation? He says, you know, if people are a kind of, you know, a 5 or a 6, yeah, let's take them up to the next level. He said, look, if you get to a 10, there's no level. It's not out of 10. Happiness isn't out of 10. You could get to a 12. You get to a 13. I think there's some tensions in literature around that, actually, because happiness is both a good, but you can be too happy. You start to make mistakes, and you can be, you know, you think about what happens to teenagers in early 20s when they, 3 days in a row of partying, things start to go wrong, right? So you've got to be careful with happiness as well. So I don't know if he's exactly right, but the point I'm trying to come back to, sorry, I'm wandering slightly here, is that we have an opportunity to raise that level of vibration, creativity, happiness. And who's to say what the level is, right? Just because that was the level we got to before. Because if you've been talking to somebody in 1925 and said, we're going to have electric cars, we're going to have cars that drive you around, we're going to have, you're going to travel, even economy, it's going to be really civilized. They're going to bring you food on a plane. woo, this is going to be the kind of life that you have. That person would have said, sure, for about 3 people who are super rich, for the king and the queen and the president, but not for anybody else. But this is the life for, you know, at least a billion of us. If you look at, Hans Rosling's work in terms of levels, there's a billion people on the planet living a pretty awesome life.
Yeah.
And maybe we can do that for quality of existence too. And I want to come back to it. So therefore, those people who are working on this, I think it might be a Hans, but the guys on Chromasonic, this kind of, this it is a new way in to enabling people to reach a different kind of level. And most people are not going to go and take psychedelic drugs. They're just not. It's just not going to happen. Even
Yeah.
if they're good for you, they're just not going to do it, right? And this is another modality, because the psychedelic state and the hypnagogic state, which these experiences inspire, induce, make happen, are very similar for freeing us up to get away from blocked patterns and go and raise what's possible for us. And so it's a way that the masses could get these benefits. Now, look, just to be really clear, this is not me with my economic hat on, because there's only a few of these things. This is me with
Right.
my trend forecaster hat on. But there again, I said the world would move towards experiences and published that book in 2013. And here we are today. So
Here we are.
maybe I'm not always wrong.
Well, I think what you've done is created, we've had a great discussion, obviously, about experiences, but you've added in some really nice layering from a psychological standpoint, from a human mindset. We all come at experiences with our own biases, our own backgrounds, our own lenses, and I love the idea of thinking very deeply about these. I told a friend the other day, I was actually during IAPA, I said, I never realized as an experience designer how much psychology I would need to know about the individual and how much sociology I would need to know about the group to design and create good experiences, good locations, and so I think all of that you've offered here is such great food for thought, very deep, not surface level stuff. And I'm so grateful for you helping me to round out an amazing first season. James, thanks for being here. What would be a great way for people to get a hold of you should they want to?
Worldexo.org. Come join the WXO. It's a great place to share ideas to make better experiences. Gosh, I feel like I'm plugging it, but apparently you should. So yeah, worldexo.org. Or if this goes out before April, come to London Experience Week. We've got people already from 27 different countries coming. And last year we had people from more than 40 countries. And I think, just like there's fashion weeks, we need experience weeks. And it's not just about our event. There are other things that are going to be happening through that week, and there'll be like fringe things that have got nothing to do with us. And that makes me pretty happy too. Obviously, I want people to come to our thing, but actually, I really want the thing to happen. Like Edinburgh's the place to be, or the Salone del Mobile. And it's funny you said you went to IAPA, because I went the other year and you didn't make it to the show and I missed you. So I'm going to have to come when you're there next time. I will. Yeah, I'm very focused on London Experience Week, which is why I wasn't there the other week, but I will be making it. But yeah, brilliant.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. Amazing questions. Fascinating to hear that you've got that similar idea about quality of life. It's nice. It's nice to have people on the same team, right? Believe in this.
Completely. I think that's an amazing thing about organizations like the WXO, is that it helps not only build a community and reinforce that, but in a sense, it creates a bit of a common language, right, for us all. And it unites us. I think it's so powerful when you meet somebody and you're like, wow, you have a similar mindset, or you're executing things similarly. It reinforces me, or I discover somebody's doing something completely different and it inspires me to do something. So I love that. And I love this community. It's amazing. Thanks so much for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Excellent. And
Thanks, Theron.
everybody, my audience, thank you so much for joining this last show of the season. Stick around for next season, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.